The worst year to be alive, the catastrophe of 536 AD. The phrase, worst year ever, gets thrown around a lot these days. Sometimes it's about a disappointing movie sequel. Other times it's because your favorite TV show got cancelled. But historians and scientists agree, if we're talking about sheer, measurable global catastrophe, no year in recorded history was worse than 536 AD. Not just bad, not just horrible, but downright apocalyptic. Today, we're breaking down why 536 wasn't just a rough patch, but a worldwide nightmare that lasted for years. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and leave a comment about what historical disaster we should cover next. All right, let's settle this once and for all. 536 AD, worst year ever. The year the sun disappeared. Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside and seeing nothing. The sun, that bright and familiar ball of fire, is still there, but barely. It glows dimly like a dying ember, struggling to break through a thick, suffocating haze. This wasn't just a gloomy day or even a bad season. This was an entire year of darkness. Byzantine historian Procopius, who was traveling with the famous general Belisarius at the time, wrote that the sun gave off light without brightness, like a perpetual eclipse, and he wasn't the only one who noticed. Centuries later, Michael the Syrian recorded, "The sun became dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for only 4 hours, and even then it was only a faint shadow. The fruits did not ripen, and the wine tasted like sour grapes. No sunlight, no crops, no hope. But what caused this worldwide eclipse? The volcano that killed the world." Modern scientists trace the disaster to one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in history, possibly in Iceland. The eruption spewed massive clouds of ash and sulfur into the sky, blocking sunlight and cooling the planet for years. Ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica show evidence of this catastrophic explosion, followed by 2 more eruptions in 540 and 547, just to make sure everyone stayed miserable. Historians call this period the Late Antique Little Ice Age, a cute name for a time when entire civilizations collapsed from cold, famine, and disease. Temperatures dropped between 1.6 and 2.5 degrees Celsius, which might not sound like much, but for a world dependent on agriculture, it was devastating. In Ireland, people recorded a period of bread failure, which is exactly as bad as it sounds. China? Summer snow. Crops were wiped out, leading to a famine that killed up to 80% of some city populations. And that's just the beginning. The plague that followed. If living in perpetual darkness and freezing temperatures wasn't bad enough, the people of 536 had one more problem: a pandemic. A particularly nasty strain of bubonic plague, the plague of Justinian, swept through the world, killing up to 50 million people. The disease started with a small sore on the hand. Then the limb swelled, the skin blackened, and the body filled with pus. Sound horrifying? It gets worse. Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, became a rotting graveyard. The dead were piled in the streets, thrown into the sea, or stacked into mass burial pits. But Emperor Justinian? He still had one small victory, because the plague was named after him. Unfortunately, being name-dropped in history didn't do much for the 50 million people who died from it. The global collapse. It wasn't just Europe and China that suffered. Across the entire planet, civilizations crashed under the weight of famine, disease, and climate disaster. Crops failed, empires crumbled, entire populations vanished. The world entered a century of darkness, a true dark age, not just in name, but in reality. And all of this can be traced back to one catastrophic volcanic eruption. In conclusion, the worst year ever, no sun, no food, a plague wiping out millions. If a Hollywood movie tried to tell this story, audiences would say it was too unrealistic. The volcanic eruption of 536 didn't just ruin 1 year. It set off a chain reaction of suffering that lasted for over a century. So, the next time you think you've had a bad year, just remember, at least you don't live in 536. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Weird History channel, and let us know in the comments what historical catastrophe we should cover next.